I am a noble lady from the capital, but I shamelessly fell in love with my own brother. He has no blood relationship with me, but he kept pushing me away because of his family's reputation. Later, I gave up and casually made an engagement with someone else. But he went crazy. He came into my room in the middle of the night, held my waist tightly with his big hands, and kissed my neck softly. I regret it. There was a night of heavy rain and strong winds, and the camellia flowers in the yard fell all over the ground. I have a hangover headache, and I had a dream last night, a precognitive dream. In my dream, I was the minor villain in the story, and my brother Shen Chi was the major villain. I was engaged to the hero, but I frequently made things difficult for the heroine, becoming a stumbling block in their relationship. In the end, he suffered the consequences of his evil deeds and drowned in the lake. Then my brother went crazy and took revenge on them, becoming the villain who frightened the heroine and gave the hero a headache. But he died later. He died on the way to burn incense for me. It was a cloudy day, and the large camellia flowers looked like severed heads, scattered all over the ground, bright red like blood. My consciousness floated in front of the huge screen, and lines of words jumped out. They lamented that he was a man of great talent and should have been an important official in the court, but because of a careless sister, he ended up dying young. They said he was cruel and merciless, and would stop at nothing to get revenge. They also praised his handsome appearance, which was so handsome that people couldn't stop looking at him. It's a pity that he died later. He knew there was an ambush in the mountain, but he still went forward in order to burn incense on the anniversary of his stupid sister's death. He was simply a sister con. How am I his sister? No sister would have such thoughts about her brother. When I first met Shen Chi, he was wearing a ragged shirt made of patches and he smelled of fish, which made me want to vomit. He was brought home by my father, who said he was an illegitimate child who had been wandering outside in his early years. My mother smiled and slapped my father 3 times in public. I didn't want to be left behind, so I whipped him with a small whip until he was covered in blood. He is not my brother, and you are not my father. You dare to disrespect my mother? Get out of here. My father was ridiculed by his colleagues and had to work as a shop assistant outside the mansion for 3 days. Later, my mother softened her heart and let them in. But the resentment in her heart never went away, and she became thinner day by day. My father then became panicked and told her the truth. My adopted brother is actually a prince who is living in exile, and his mother is the late concubine Sue. The story of the monster born when concubine Sue was in great favor is still a folk legend today. The truth of the matter was that the queen could not tolerate the favored concubine Sue and her unborn child, who had received so much attention. With a trick of replacing the prince with a raccoon, concubine Sue lost her favor, and Shen Chi went from being a noble prince to a fisherman's son. My father couldn't bear to see the royal heir living outside, but he didn't dare to go against the queen's faction who were at the peak of their power, so he could only say that this was his own illegitimate child and raised him in the mansion. When my mother knew the truth, she accepted it and was quite gentle toward Shen Chi. Only I, as always, looked down on him and would beat him up for no reason. He has always been patient, his pair of dark eyes hiding all emotions, and he has never said a bad word about me. But I won't appreciate it. What if I'm a prince? If you fall into my Shen mansion, you have to be my dog. Especially since this dog dared to rob my parents. As long as the queen is on the throne, he will be a little thing that no one cares about and will be bullied by me. Later, when I was climbing a rockery and my foot slipped and fell into the water, he held me tightly. There were still marks of being whipped on my arms, and those marks were stained by dirty water, but he never let up and persisted until the servants came and rescued me. I was so scared that I kept crying. He held my injured hand and said, "Otzi, don't be afraid." From that day on, I became his follower. I am hot-tempered and willful, and no one wants to play with me. Only he is always gentle and tolerant. So when I was old enough to get married, I gave my heart to him without thinking. I have never been good at hiding things. If I like someone, I will show it. My parents thought it was a bit wrong, but they didn't object. He, on the other hand, kept his distance from me. The young man frowned slightly, his ink-black eyes full of disapproval. He talked about family reputation and moral principles, but the only thing he never said was that he didn't love me. We both knew that we were not related by blood, but I was still obsessed with him, and he didn't even look at me in a good mood. Until I saw him traveling with a woman. If he wanted me to back down, he should just tell me he didn't mean it, instead of trampling on my face. I, Shen Chi, am not someone who can't let go of something. She picked a camellia at random and threw it at him. The scarlet flower looked like a heart falling on the stairs. I wish my brother will get what he wants and be together forever. I have never looked back since then. I have always been proud, and those who lose me are lost forever. Soon I agreed to meet other boys, and finally, after being selected by my mother, I got married to Lu Qinhan. That day, Shen Chi stood outside my courtyard door all night long. But he didn't want me. Lu Qinhan is a young and talented man who is on par with him. He is good-looking, talented, and a dignified and polite gentleman. He is much better than the sultry him. It's just that Lu Qinhan is too good, so good that it gives people a headache. How come the future husband I randomly chose is the male lead? If I had realized it earlier, it would have saved me a lot of trouble. But it happened right after I got engaged. I held Taoji's hand and sat in front of the mirror while enduring the headache. The person in the mirror looked impatient, with her bright and beautiful eyes filled with annoyance. Seeing this, I snapped the mirror and became even more annoyed. I am no longer as willful as I was when I was a child, getting engaged today and breaking off the engagement tomorrow. We still have to find a way to make Lu Qinhan take the initiative to cancel the engagement. This bastard is clearly flirting with another woman, but he still refuses to cancel the engagement with me. Bitch, all bitch. I invited Lu Qinhan to have a chat at Puning Temple. The breeze was gentle, but I was getting impatient waiting. Soon he finally came as agreed, dressed in a white long-sleeve shirt, looking graceful and elegant, with a pair of clear eyes and eyebrows that exuded a cold and aloof look. But I just find him disgusting. I am familiar with the contents of the book, and I know this legendary, immortal thoroughly. What noble character is this? It's nothing but arrogance and conceit. Especially since the object of his arrogance is me. He is saying one thing to me and doing another behind my back. Miss Shen, how are you these days? He smiled politely, but I couldn't laugh. Mr. Liu, I wonder what you think of Jishiteng. He kept smiling and just tightened the folding fan in his hand. You investigate me? I tilted my head, curled my lips, and smiled. Shouldn't I investigate you? You are my fiancé, but you are so close to another woman. Has no one taught you to keep yourself clean? Lu Qinhan lowered his eyelashes, which were as long as crow feathers. Miss Shen misunderstood. I went to Jishiteng only to treat my illness. A jerk who dares to do something, but not to take responsibility. So, you're not going to give her a name? Mr. Liu doesn't like me anyway, so wouldn't it be nice to break off the engagement and marry someone else? He suddenly smiled and took a few steps closer. Miss Shen is so cute. How could I not like her? The ambiguity in his words made my hair stand on end. Finally, she gave him a disgusted look and ran away. What the hell? He and the heroine clearly have a mutual affection for each other, but he's still hanging on to me. Dog man, scumbag man. I got home still feeling sick, so I whipped the dummy into a pulp. Just as I was venting my anger, Shen Chi appeared under the porch without me noticing. I wanted to curse him, but when I thought about how he avenged me and died for me, I held it back. Aji, who did you go to see? I rolled my eyes. I can see whoever I want to see. Why does it have to do with him? He seemed to sense the pressure in my words, so he softened his tone and said, I'm worried about you. I slowly put away the whip. I'm going to see Lu Qinhan. He and I are in love, and we will live a good life in the future. I won't chase you anymore. Are you satisfied? His expression darkened, and he stepped closer. Aji, he is not a good match. I will find a way to cancel your engagement. I was surprised but more confused. I finally stopped bothering him. Shouldn't he be happy? Aji, don't be mad at me. Shen Chi had a guilty look in his eyes. He held a snack in his hand and lowered his head to beg for forgiveness from me. After all, he was the one who had loved me for many years. Even if there was no love, there was still family affection. I accepted his offer and thought, well, the lotus cakes from Qingdong are quite attentive. Taoji, serve the tea. After many days, I was finally able to be with him peacefully. If I think about it carefully, I was being a bit unreasonable. There's nothing wrong with him treating me as his sister. And do I really like him? Once you calm down and think about it, you will find that the affection is just this. Love always changes, but family love is indeed more reliable. So I can finally call him brother. He looked incredulous and smiled stiffly. What did Aji call me? I licked the crispy crust from the corner of my mouth and looked at him in confusion. Brother. Hasn't he always stressed that he is my brother? Now he is not happy when I call him that. Aji. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. I said, Lu Qinhan is not a good match. Of course I know that, but what does that have to do with this? You can't love him. I was a little annoyed. He knew clearly that I hated constraints the most, but why did he always say this and that? Don't look at me like that. His grip became stronger and stronger. I pulled it back twice, leaving a circle of red marks on my wrist. What did you do? I slapped him subconsciously. His face was slapped red, his tongue touched his cheek, and he turned around with his Adam's apple rolling. It was my recklessness. Just that look made my heart skip a beat. Am I too willful? But my wrist really hurts. They parted on bad terms again. He was really becoming more and more weird. But what matters now is not him, but my unfortunate marriage. Lu Qinhan is really difficult to entangle, but no matter how difficult it is, he must be made to voluntarily cancel the engagement. I plan to start with Meng Zilin. Aren't they deeply in love with each other? So let her go and persuade him. I walked slowly with Taoji to the vicinity of Jishidateng. When we passed the bridge, we saw a lot of noise below. The crowd gathered, and after a closer look they discovered that it was a young child who fell into the water, and the one who rescued him was Meng Zilin. She looked like she was a good swimmer. She rescued the child and handed him to people on the shore. Then she put on the clothes given to her by others, smiling and being very humble. The crowd cheered and surrounded her. She was as dazzling as a goddess. I felt stiff and suffocated as if I had fallen into ice water. It turns out that she can swim. Then why did she slap the water and call for help when she and I fell into the water together? Why pretend you can't swim? Lu Qinhan made a choice between me and her, and then I drowned. Haha, what a kind-hearted and reasonable heroine. I really believed it. It turns out they all deserve to die. I turned back home and cried in my mother's arms. When she was at a loss, I proposed to break off the engagement. Mother, Lu Qinhan is not a good person, and neither is the woman he likes. They are all bad people, all of them. I will be killed by them. Anyang hesitated, but Master Lu clearly said that he has a crush on you. Is there a misunderstanding? There is no misunderstanding. Shen Chi came in out of nowhere, and what he held in his hand was a marriage certificate? The Lu family has returned the marriage certificate. The marriage is off. I took the marriage certificate and looked through it in surprise and found out that the engagement was really canceled. Finally getting rid of those two bad guys, I was so happy that I didn't know what to do. I turned around and hugged Anyang and kept rubbing against her until she couldn't help laughing. On the way back to Ziyuan, Shen Chi grabbed my sleeve. Let me see how your wrist is. He even dared to say that if the cancellation of the engagement had not been handled so well, I would have kicked him twice. Under my angry gaze, he rolled up his sleeves, leaving a circle of purple finger marks on his fair wrist. Why is it so serious? He took out the ointment and applied it carefully. Be gentle, apply carefully, and do not let go. After I argued a few times, he suddenly asked, I took the initiative and ruined your marriage. Will you blame me? I had been thinking about getting out of that marriage, but I was afraid that he would find out and think that I liked him. So she thought for a moment and said, I broke off the engagement because he had someone else in his heart. Next time I will definitely choose someone who is clean both physically and mentally. He hesitated to speak, and finally let go. To escape my bad luck, I excitedly ran to Puning Temple to burn incense. Speaking of predictive dreams, it is really mysterious. It must be that the gods and Buddhas could not bear to see me die so tragically, so they gave me a warning. After I donated a large sum of money, a handsome monk immediately came to preach to me. I believed in this, but what he said was really mysterious. The mouth opened and closed. I didn't understand a word he said. I just thought he looked good. He has a straight nose, thin lips, and kind eyes. He just smiles gently when he sees me in a daze. No wonder Puning Temple is so popular, no wonder. Ahem, what a sin. With him seeing me off, I crossed the threshold with a smile on my face. Not bad, not bad. I'll come again next time. When he turned around and looked up, he saw Lu Qinhan's eyes, which looked a little painful. Unlucky. I glared at him and walked away. Miss Shen, do you have nothing to say to me? I don't know what Mr. Lu means. You and I have nothing else to do with each other. If you want to talk, go to Jishitang. He hurriedly defended himself. I said I have no feelings for Miss Meng. You convicted me just because of a little suspicion. Is that inappropriate? It would have been better if he didn't say it, because as soon as he said it, I remembered the cause of my death. I was clearly his fiancée, but he abandoned me to save another woman. I have no love for him, but my husband must be on my side, otherwise it would be better to marry a dead person than to marry him. If I don't regret the engagement, should I still wait for him to make a decision? Why can't I be the one to decide? Seeing my gloomy face, Lu Qinhan said in a soothing tone, I just don't want to give up. You smiled and said you were willing, didn't you? Why is it like this? He tried to pull my hand, but I slapped him in the face. I have never had feelings for you. It was just my parents' order. I hope you won't recognize me when we meet again. Not to mention that he was the one who killed my brother. If I had the ability to kill, I would have killed him. I returned to the Shen mansion before the sunset. When I approached the gate, I found Shen Chi waiting for me with an unhappy look on his face, like a door god. Why did you come back so late? My dad doesn't care about me. So who is he? Who did you go see? He restrained himself and grabbed the corner of my sleeve. I couldn't get away and could only answer. Puning Temple, I saw the monks, okay? A monk? Suddenly, I remembered the Zen words that monk Qingjun had spoken. I didn't understand them, but I understood them. Actually, if we don't get married, it's not bad to find a live-in son-in-law. My parents won't blame me anyway. I wonder if that monk is willing to abandon the Buddha and me. Why are you blushing? Really? I touched my cheek, and it was a little hot. I fanned myself with my hands and was anxious to get back to the yard, but he didn't let go. What did you do today? Seeing that I refused to say, he looked at Taoji. The young lady went to Puning Temple, but she met Mr. Lu. Taoji, you are a fool who seeks glory as a seller. Shen Chi dragged me back to the room, and before I could call for help, he closed the door. Elder brother, I'm not your brother. He pressed me against the wall and looked down at me with a cold face. It was dark in the room, and I couldn't see his expression clearly. I just feel dangerous. In the silence, I could only hear his gradually heavier breathing. I realized something was wrong and tried to escape in panic, but was pushed back. Don't move. Maji, help. He covered my mouth to prevent me from making any sound. You still have feelings for him. He will kill you. I shook my head desperately, but he misunderstood what I meant. You don't want to believe it? Ji, I'm the only one who will always treat you well. Don't love him. He moved closer and closer, to the point where I could smell his breath, and his eyes were sparkling with tears, carrying with them feelings that I couldn't understand. Aji. He sighed and kissed the back of his hand, through one hand, in a very intimate posture. I was completely shocked and didn't come to my senses until he let me go. What do you mean? He took 2 steps back and replied in a steady voice, I like you. I was furious. You said we can only be siblings. I've already let you go. Why are you provoking me now? Aji, when will I, Shinrongji, allow you to order me around? I was so angry that I took out the sachet I had embroidered for him from the embroidery basket. On the sachet were embroidered words, "May my brother get what he wishes for, and live in peace for years." I cut it into pieces with a pair of scissors and threw it to him. Get lost. I had tried hard to treat him as my brother, but now it seems that even if we are siblings, it is impossible. Not long after the falling out, he really hadn't returned to the Shen mansion for a long time. As Shen holds an official position, he does not have much free time on weekdays. Now that it doesn't bother me, my life is easy and comfortable. Before I knew it, the camellia flowers fell one by one, and it was time for me to die. This day should be a spring flower viewing party, and all men and women of appropriate age in the capital must go. I wanted to pretend to be sick and not go, but my mother pulled me out from under the quilt. "Mother, I am really sick. Look at my pale face, cough cough." She pinched my face, looked at it from side to side for a moment, and suddenly rubbed it with her thumb. "Use watercolor to cover up the complexion. This is what your mother left over." She pinched his face gently. "Be good, and bring me a son-in-law, understand?" Okay. My pretense of illness was exposed, so I had no choice but to dress up and attend the banquet. If today wasn't so unlucky, I would actually be happy to come. I always like to look at good-looking people. The handsome men and pretty women at the spring banquet were a real feast for the eyes. I found my friends and whispered to each other about who was more handsome, who was taller, whose skirt was prettier, and whose hairstyle was more unusual. Hey, isn't that Dr. Meng from Jishitang? What happened between her and Miss Lin? I turned my head to look over and saw Meng Zilan dressed simply, with only a wet spot on her skirt. She was arguing with Miss Lin patiently. My friend pulled me over and I heard the reason for the dispute. It was really the medicine remains the same, just a change of soup. Are Ms. Lin and Lu Qinan close? My friend exclaimed in amazement. You knew that? I noticed you haven't been out lately, but I didn't expect you to be so well informed. Ms. Lin has met Mr. Lu before, so maybe it'll work out. Why on earth do you want to break off the engagement with him? Why? I suppressed my friend's curiosity and felt a little soft-hearted when I saw Ms. Lin blushing as she argued. Normally, she was just a little greedy, but had a good character. Now she was blamed and her reputation was ruined. Not to mention her marriage with Lu Qinhan, even her future. It's hard to say. I walked over and said, "What's going on? Tell me slowly." She looked at me gratefully and said, "We were walking just fine." But she suddenly stopped and leaned towards me, spilling her wine glass and staining my clothes. But she insisted that I did it on purpose. After saying these 2 sentences, she couldn't help crying, looked at me with tears in her eyes, and begged me to give her justice. I didn't say Ms. Lin did it on purpose, but maybe she didn't take it seriously enough. What do you mean I didn't hold it firmly? I would have held it firmly if you hadn't bumped into me. Seeing that they were about to quarrel again, I took Lin Yu's arm and said, "Okay, it's just a small matter." I looked at Meng Zilan coldly and sneered in my heart. She was so stubborn again. Even if she was the instigator, she could still act like she was being targeted. She is a victim. She is a pitiful person. We noble ladies are all arrogant, domineering, and bad women who bully the weak. It's just a piece of clothing. I have a spare set of clothes in my carriage. Would you like to change into it? I know Miss Lin's character. She only thinks about food and drink. She would never do anything to deliberately bully others, nor would she splash her favorite fruit wine on others. Miss Meng has misunderstood. Let's both take a step back. With my help, the quarrel did not break out. Lin Yu shook my arm and said coquettishly, "Humph, why are you making me think that I have nothing but food and drink?" I picked up a piece of cake from the table. "So, do you want to eat it?" She took it with joy and ate it happily. After a while, the crowd dispersed and went out in groups to admire the flowers. Meng Zilan also changed her clothes and thanked me with a smile. I tried hard to hold back my smile and flirted with her. Suddenly, she flicked her handkerchief, and the rich fragrance filled my face. I sneezed twice and looked away in dismay. Even if this person is from a poor family, he can't be so vulgar. This lethal dose of perfume. After that I avoided her, fearing that I would fall into the lake after a fight with her like in the book. I followed my friends to admire the flowers and chat, not daring to be alone and staying far away from the lake. But gradually something started to feel wrong. Why does my heart beat faster no matter who I look at? And a feeling of restlessness flows from top to bottom. A warm current surges out. That perfume powder just now. Meng Zealand, you lowly bastard. I clutched my collar tightly, and my friends saw that I was blushing, and they gathered around me, chattering and asking questions. But I just feel that even the slightest touch on the cheek makes her moan. This won't work, it will make you look bad in public. And Meng Zealand was still in the distance, smiling at me softly. I feel uncomfortable, help me back to the guest room. Using the last bit of my strength, I finally hid in the house. Taoji looked around and found no one else. I then collapsed to the ground. I think I have heat stroke, you guys go out first. The spring breeze was not dry, so I shouldn't have gotten a heat stroke, but they still left space for me. I lay on the bed biting the quilt and holding on. Taoji was frightened and said, "Miss, what's going on? This kind of thing cannot be made public. Even if I was drugged, it would be spread in a terrible way. Water, get some cold water." While waiting, I couldn't stand the heat and took off some clothes to feel better. In a daze, I seemed to see a gaze falling on me. Peach branch, water. A hand handed me a glass of water, which I knocked over. The water splashed on my clothes, finally bringing a hint of coolness. With this moment of clarity, I was able to see clearly who was coming. Lu Qinhan. Shameless villain. He went a step further. It was my ignorance that caused you to be wronged, Aji. I was wrong. I tried to crawl under the quilt, but he grabbed my wrist again. Aji, are you feeling uncomfortable? Let me help you. His eyes were so fiery that it made people sick, and he was trying to do something bad but was pretending to be so. You think you are a good person. You have learned all the teachings of Confucius and Mencius. I, Shenrongji, would rather die than have anything to do with you. He still climbed onto the bed. You are not awake now. Wait until tomorrow. You will thank me. I was so frightened that tears welled up in my eyes, but he suddenly froze, closed his eyes, and fell towards me. Then someone grabbed his collar and threw him to the ground. When I saw the person coming, I cried even harder. Oh, why did you come just now? Shen Chi put his sleeves on me with a dark face and asked, "Who did it?" It was Meng Zealand. She waved perfume powder at me. Shen Chi took me away and told everyone I was sick. This dumb bitch is going to eat it. When I pull my hand out, I'm going to kill her. But now I was sitting in the carriage. My whole body was so weak that I couldn't even muster any strength. I could only lean on Shen Chi's arms and endure my increasingly hot body. All that echoed in the narrow space was my breathing. He closed his eyes and turned his head away. His tense jawline and his Adam's apple that occasionally moved were inexplicably alluring. I really want to take a bite. I want to make his steady breathing messy. I want to… Shen Chi. He glanced over, his ears turning red. Do you really want me to beg you? He swallowed his saliva and said in a hoarse voice, I'm afraid you'll be angry. I pulled him over by his collar. Don't be angry, hurry up. She was reciting poems happily in the narrow room, with her silk hair draped over her shoulders. I gently stretched my arms around my lover, and there is no place where I cannot feel compassion. Magic Revised Edition, Midnight Songs 42. Before rushing back to the Shun residence, I finally calmed down. My lower lip was red and swollen from biting myself. He licked the liquid at the corner of his mouth and avoided my gaze. Achi, what should we do from now on? He helped me adjust the hem of my skirt and quietly held my hand. I'm ready. Wait for me for a while. Look at how confident he is of victory, calm and steady, not at all like when he knelt in front of me just now. Ahem. I reached out and touched his red ears. He resisted for a while, then silently covered his face and said, Stop making trouble. Would you like me to help you? His Adam's apple rolled. His eyes were fiery and restrained. He hesitated for a moment before saying, No. Then he sat far away from me, with his eyes closed and no word spoken, as if in meditation. However, veins bulged on his clenched fists, and even the hair on his forehead was soaked with sweat. Before getting off the car, I went over and kissed him, then walked back home without any trace of anger. In the following days, I focused my attention on Meng Zilin. Doesn't she always like to pretend to be the poor little one who gets bullied? If I don't bully her, wouldn't that be disappointing her expectations? She probably doesn't know what the rage of a noble lady is. We live by the rules and dare not make any mistakes, but when dealing with someone like her who has no background, we don't even need to dirty our hands. Not long after, she was brought to my house. She still had her head held high, with anger and resentment in her eyes. It's really strange. Why does she still look so self-righteous when she does something wrong? Doesn't she blush when she looks at herself in the mirror? It doesn't matter. She is a doctor, but she has no medical ethics. She abused drugs and put me in a terrible situation. I disable her right hand. When the tip of the knife pierced her palm, I could see the fear on her usually calm and modest face. Shun Rongji, you can't treat me like this. I am the heroine, the darling of this world. I looked up at her and sneered. So, what if you're the heroine? I don't hate you for climbing up the ladder, but you can't step on me. You can't just take things from others and then blame them for your mistakes. Background is not an excuse for making mistakes, and meanness cannot be disguised as progress. Soon, I heard that she left Jishidiang and went to Lu Mansion to seek protection from Lu Qinhan. Unfortunately, the hero in the book showed no mercy to her, and she eventually left the capital in depression and disappeared. And Shen Chi quietly attacked the foreign relatives in the court, and his methods were not conspicuous. It was not until more than half of the foreign relatives were left that they discovered that it was he who was behind the plot. He has a kind of talent. Although he looks so upright, he is very good at conspiracy and trickery. When he was attacked fiercely by his foreign relatives, he recognized the emperor and transformed himself into the fourth prince, changing his name to Mu Qi, but I am still used to calling him Shen Chi in my heart. The queen who had harmed the royal heir in the past was also dealt with while the momentum of clearing out the foreign relatives was going on. The Lu family was the empress's maternal family. As in-laws, they were oppressed to the point that they had to sell their ancestral home. I went to see Lu Qinhan when he left Beijing, and I was doubtful whether I should kill him. I didn't want to let him go and leave trouble for the future, but I had never done such a thing, so I couldn't bear to do it. He seemed to recognize me, stammered a few words, and then turned and walked out of the city. In this case, then he should never return to Beijing. It would be better for him to live out his life abroad and never get in my way or block Shen Chi's way. As the son of his former lover, and because of the guilt of living away from home for many years, Shen Chi easily gained the emperor's attention, even have the potential to compete for that position. By the way, now when he returns to the Shen mansion, it can no longer be said that he is going home, but rather visiting. My parents looked at him with 1,000 emotions. My father shed tears several times, but he kept smiling and said, "Finally, I have returned to my roots. I have fulfilled my mission." Shen Chi was embarrassed. "Dad, don't be like this." I lowered my head and couldn't hold back my laughter, trying hard not to make any sound. Everything finally settled down at the family dinner. It was still the familiar taste, still the familiar feeling. After dinner, we went to the garden to digest the food. I looked around and saw that there was no one around, so I quickly pulled him into the rockery. "Did you miss me?" Shen Chi looked away uncomfortably. "We are not married yet. Don't get so close." The more he behaved politely, the more I wanted to go too far, so I took another step forward. "How you deal with Lu Qinhan, is it for the public or for your own benefit?" "Of course it's selfish." His dark eyes stared at me, and I suddenly felt a shudder in my heart, as if I was being stared at by a poisonous snake. He lowered his eyelashes again and smiled gently. "I should go back now." I pestered him for a while, but he still hurried on to do his business. Afterwards, my father came to me and was somewhat reluctant about my relationship with Shen Chi. "Dad, you didn't object before. Why are you like this now?" He thought about it and shook his head. He was too cruel to his political enemies. It's not like his usual self. I'm afraid he has been pretending. Judging from his actions, he is not a good person. I suddenly thought of him in the book, who is described as a cruel and unscrupulous person. Although there are some mistakes in the book, it is generally good. You can't just write him as a calm person and as vicious as a venomous snake. I was a little uncertain, so my letters to him were somewhat perfunctory. Who would have thought that that night, he broke into my bedroom and stared at me for a long time without moving? I always feel uneasy in my dreams, as if I am being entangled and tightened by a snake. I was so angry that I almost fainted when I opened my eyes and saw a dark figure sitting beside the bed. It's me, Shen Chi. Do you want to scare me to death? After a long period of comforting, my heartbeat finally calmed down. Then I felt something was wrong and hugged the quilt tightly. What are you doing here at this late hour? Aji has been a little cold to me lately. Wasn't it just that I didn't reply to 2 of his letters? Was it necessary for him to climb through the window in the middle of the night? Is it just me that's in Aji's heart? I always feel uneasy. He reached out and stroked my hair, smoothing it down, and suddenly asked, "On the day of the spring banquet, I heard that you didn't want to go at first. What do you care about me? I just wanted to do it, but I ended up going there, didn't I?" In the darkness, his eyes were heavy, as if he was examining something. "Since you were drugged, why didn't you go to the lake to relieve the symptoms? I didn't know you were afraid of water." Of course it was because I drowned in the lake in the book. How dare I run to the lake? "Aji, are you back too?" I avoided his sight and realized, why did he say that? In my surprised gaze, he smiled and said, "As expected, the heaven has been very kind to me." Shen Chi suddenly picked me up and put me in his arms. "You have also been reborn, right? I broke off the engagement for you, and you were not angry, and you even avoided a dead end." Ji has become smarter. I am a little afraid of his neurotic look. Is the rebirth he talks about the same as what I understand? Did Shen Chi, who died in the book, come back to life in reality? But it can't be so intimate. Who knew he would go even further and kiss the back of my neck? I struggled, and he sucked on my neck. I have regretted it a long time ago. I shouldn't have pushed you away for the sake of my family's reputation, and I shouldn't have hated my father and refused to recognize him. Only with power can I protect my Aji and assassinate Liu Qinhan in the suburbs of Beijing. My eyes widened. He killed Liu Qinhan. Aji is thinking about him again. When you want to see him off that day, I thought that I couldn't keep him. Aji should be mine. He had suppressed his love for 2 lifetimes, which exploded at this moment. The rules and regulations that had restrained him were also diluted in the absurdity of rebirth. Shen Chi became less like Shen Chi and more like the person in the book. I didn't know how to face it, so I could only push him away. "No, you can't do this to me." His hands tightened inch by inch. "Why not? Since we have a new beginning, we must make up for it all. Or, do you still miss him? Aji is mine." The words were drowned in the wet and sticky kiss. I had no feelings for Liu Qinhan in the first place. Even when we said goodbye at the city gate, all I was thinking about was whether I should kill him to prevent future troubles. But I can't accept that he, who has always been stable and self-controlled, has become so crazy. I want the previous Shen Chi, not the current mad dog. I pushed him away with all my strength and slapped him hard. My palm hurts so much, but he seems to feel nothing. The look he gives me is scary and obsessive, yet gentle enough to lure you into a spider web. "Does your hand hurt?" He blew on the palm of my hand and kissed it gently with a fascinated look on his face. I wanted to scream, but I was afraid of being seen. A man and a woman are alone in a room late at night. If you are caught, I will really be tied to him, and there will be no turning back. "Achi, didn't you say that you would marry me soon? I want to wait until the wedding night." He finally calmed down and said, "Yes, I want to give you the best wedding." When he realized his rude behavior, I persuaded him softly and finally coaxed him away. There was silence in the room for a moment. He was really gone. I then collapsed on the bed, my back covered in sweat. I had another nightmare at night, and it lasted until the early hours of the morning. When young Shen Chi saw that I loved climbing rockeries, He secretly smeared ointment on my climbing path. After I fell into the water, he watched me quietly until I was about to drown, and then he reached out his hand. That indifferent face turned anxious when I saw it. There is no such thing as complete sincerity and no regrets. It's all just scheming and manipulation. A few days later, I left the house under the pretext of worshipping Buddha, secretly took a few carriages, and finally left the capital. When I first saw them leaving Beijing, I felt fortunate and happy, but now it's my turn. These few days, I've gradually figured it out. Shen Chi always wears a mask, and his so-called solemnity and propriety are just a means to deceive people. He is a mad dog and a poisonous snake at heart. In the past, he gave me the feeling of a tall metasequoia tree, somewhat gloomy, but at least stable and reliable. But now, he is more like the quagmire under the metasequoia, and if he is not careful, he will fall into it and be doomed. I don't even know how much of his prejudice against me is genuine. Just as she was thinking about it, the carriage suddenly stopped and Taoji shouted outside, "Miss, eldest master, it's the fourth prince who is chasing us." He actually brought quite a few men with him. I looked at the slaves he brought with him. The number gap was too huge. I didn't even have the confidence to fight to the death. "Why did you leave me?" I sighed deeply. I had guessed this result long before I ran away, but I was unwilling to just wait at home obediently. "You could have kept lying to me. Why did you have to make me see your true colors?" "I don't like it." His usually straight back seemed to be broken, his face disappeared into the shadows, and only 2 drops of diamond-like liquid could be seen falling. "Take the young lady back and keep her under strict supervision." On the second day, I received a marriage proposal from the emperor. Shen Chi was named King of Jin, and his residence was located in the capital. The wedding would be held soon. My parents tried to comfort me, but I just wouldn't let it go. How much of his kindness to me in the past was calculated? How much of his obsession with me now is unwillingness? The lover I had in my heart has changed. Can he still treat me as before? What I like is the calm and gentle him, not the one who is good at using tricks and will point his fangs at me at any time. I don't want someone who can't hold on to me. I went on a hunger strike and made a few noises. Suddenly I saw him standing in the room. "Do not abuse your own body." I slowly closed my eyes. My stomach ached slightly. The heavier my breathing became, the more I felt the pain. I really didn't want to say anything more. "Aji, do you hate me so much? Then, will you cancel the engagement?" Asked hopefully. He lowered his brows and said, "The marriage is granted by the emperor and cannot be changed." Knowing that there was no hope of breaking off the engagement, I stopped torturing myself and started to torment him. "I want pearls from the East China Sea, gems from the south, and the most prosperous shop in the capital." I changed my routine every day. Jewelry and treasures gradually filled up my room, and house deeds and property deeds were placed in a box for me to choose from. He was satisfied with everything, but I was not interested at all. The oriental pearls were embroidered on the exquisitely crafted pointed toe shoes. He half knelt to put the shoes on me. His drooping eyelashes were dark and long, looking very attractive. After she was dressed, she looked up at me again. Her ink-black eyes reflected the sunlight, and were full of deep affection and loyalty, as if she loved me terribly. "Aji, is there anything else you want?" I withdrew my foot and said, "We shouldn't see each other so often before marriage. I want you to be more polite." He suddenly grabbed my ankle and said, "Even the most rude people have done this before." I struggled but failed to get free, so I kicked him hard with my other foot. After being kicked, he laughed and let go. "Aji, I'm waiting to have a drink with you." The wedding date finally came. The ceremony was perfect, but I was as dazed as a bystander. I really want to marry him. A man who has been with me for a long time, but whose depth I don't know. I know I am stupid, and living with such a cunning person is really seeking death. The veil was lifted, and he showed some joy on his face, wearing a red robe, looking like a young man without any gloom. Used to pretending. It was getting late, and the red candles had to burn all night. He had taken a shower, and the smell of alcohol was still on his body. I don't know how much time passed. He tossed and turned, unable to hold back his breath, and finally reached out his hand. I hid until my back was against the wall, and there was no way to avoid it anymore. He leaned over and kissed me straight away. I opened my eyes wide and bit down fiercely. The corners of Shen Chi's mouth were full of blood. He paused for a moment and then looked over with a stern look in his eyes. "You can hate me." The smell of blood spread, and he sucked fiercely as if he didn't feel any pain. No matter how I beat him or scolded him, he turned a deaf ear to me, as if this was the only thing that had to be done in the world. My strength was exhausted. I curled up and gasped for breath. "I liked you so much last time." I slapped him again, and he licked the corner of his mouth and continued without caring. "When I was 14, you said you would marry me instead of anyone else. When you first started learning embroidery, the first sachet you made was for me. I personally selected and tamed your pony before bringing it back to you. You keep saying you love me and that I'm the only one for you, but now you hate me so much because of someone else? Aji, it's too late." Every time he spoke, he would move. Every word he said was mixed with strong emotions, making my head a mess. "You are mine." He leaned down and embraced her thoroughly. I trembled and bit his shoulder tightly. "I hate you." He paused, then continued on. Suddenly, something seemed to fall on my face. I thought it was sweat, but when I looked closely, I found that his face was covered with tears. My head was buzzing for a while. "If loving me is so painful, why do you continue?"
Why?
Before I could investigate further, my hand had already touched his face, gently wiping away the tears. Shen Chi was stunned for a moment, then suddenly hugged me and said, "Love me more, please." I finally realized that he probably loved me terribly. When did it start? Cold-eyed and disguised venomous snake, when will you be sincere to me? Male protagonist's perspective. When Shen Chi saw Shen Rongji for the first time, he knew that this was a spoiled little girl, stupid and violent, and she was good with the whip. He tried hard to act like a good boy, but he had little sense of the reality of his own life. The prince. He is as far away as the clouds in the sky. He only knew that he had to seize the opportunity to stay in the Shen mansion, otherwise he would still be that fishmongering kid. Mr. and Mrs. Shen were good-tempered people, but the eldest daughter made no secret of her dislike for him. Beating and scolding are commonplace. Spoiled children are always ignorant. He carefully concealed the injury and had no intention of using it to gain sympathy. Even if Shen's father and mother found out, they would just scold him, and Shen Rongji would hate him even more. He had to find an opportunity for her to accept it. So he smeared grease on the rockery and waited quietly for rescue. Such a stupid, shallow, irritable, and willful person can be loved by everyone just because of his good background. He was indeed jealous. People's destinies were really different. Seeing that she was slowly losing strength, he finally picked her up. After that, she changed her mind about him, and for the better. When Shen Rongji hates you, she can be so tormented that she wants to kill her. When Shen Rongji loves you, she always keeps you in her mind. Keep 3 pieces of delicious snacks for your 3 closest people. Shen Rongji raised her face, her round eyes smiling, and said sweetly, "Brother, this piece is for you." When Shen Chi got the snack for the first time, he was surprised and excited. He was also accepted as a member of the family. Being truly loved by such a little girl, my heart is filled with a gentle warmth. Only those who are pampered can have such pure goodness and evil. At this moment, he also felt biasly that although the little girl was bad, she was bad in a cute way. Shen's father and mother tried to correct her shortcomings bit by bit, and she did improve a little after all. She also made many friends when she went out. Slowly she grew up, from a little girl who pierced 8 holes on her 10 fingers to a grown-up girl who could embroider sachets and handkerchiefs. One day, 14-year-old Shen Rongji suddenly said something stupid. "My mother said she wants to find a son, and I should get married in a few years. Can't I marry you?" He thought it was a joke at first, but she took it seriously. Whenever she went out to play, she always brought back a branch of flowers, sometimes orchids, sometimes crabapples. In the crowd, she can always find him first, And that kind of partial look in her eyes makes people's hearts beat fast. But it is impossible for them to do so. Others who don't know that they are not related by blood will only think that they are disregarding moral principles. He was protected by Mr. and Mrs. Shen and had to take care of the family's reputation. But he was still looking forward to it, looking forward to the next flower, looking forward to the snacks she would leave for him, and looking forward to other gifts. A child who grew up in a slum and struggled to survive longs for all the warmth. He wanted to stay in the Shen mansion forever. This was the best place for him to go. Shen Chi was like a snake fed by love. He retracted his fangs and carefully showed his gentleness. So, I can't be greedy anymore. A greedy person will be punished. Finally, he made up his mind to end this abnormal relationship. Aji was a proud girl. When she saw him in contact with another woman, she never crossed the line again. The camellia that was thrown down was as red as blood, and it fell on the steps like a heart. Shen Chi picked it up carefully, took it back to her room and nurtured it with spring water, but the flower quickly withered, just like her love. She is engaged to someone else. Shen Chi stood outside her yard in a daze, wanting to knock on the door, but then pulling his hand back. Reason told him that all he had ever wanted in his life had been achieved, and he should not be greedy. However, the door that separated him from the other side was what his heart desired. Shen Chi eventually went back, slowly, suppressing his love. He could control his anger and murderous intent, so he could control his love. He distanced himself little by little and tried to convince himself that it was just family love. This is the only way to maintain the happiness at the moment. He will carry her on his back and send her to the bridal sedan, watch her get along with her lover, and when she gives birth to a child, he will be a good uncle. He will. Shen Chi covered his face, his heart tightening just thinking about it. Can he really watch her get married? The long servant suddenly rushed over and reported, "The young lady is in trouble. The young lady drowned." When he picked up Aji with trembling hands, his head, which was always held high in the past, drooped weakly, his black hair fell like a waterfall, and his pale face turned blue. She is really dead. Died from jealousy among women. He asked Lu Qinhan for help, but the idiot protected the bitch behind him. It turns out that they all deserve to die and be buried with Aji. Shen Chi tore off his disguise and retaliated in a self-destructive way, but he was always just a little bit short, just a little bit short. Why are they always so lucky? Why do they always manage to find a glimmer of hope by chance? He spent a year and still failed to take revenge. It is the season when camellia flowers fall again, and it is the anniversary of Aji's death. Halfway through his journey, he realized something was wrong. The woods on both sides of the mountain road were too quiet. He should have avoided it, but on the anniversary of his death, Aji couldn't see him. Would she be angry? She was the most careful. Otherwise, she wouldn't have refused to enter his dreams. Don't blame your brother. He brought Aji's favorite snacks. He fell in front of Aji's grave, his blood spreading and staining her favorite flowers, favorite snacks, and her favorite person. End of full text.